In this tutorial we're going to take a basic look at the various modelling tools. We're going to take a file where I've already created the vectors that we're going to use, and then we're going to use the Create Shape tool, the 2-rail sweep and the Extrude tool to create all the individual components to build up this 3D composite model of a Fleur De Lys. So let's start by opening an existing file, and we're going to navigate to our tutorials folder for the Fleur De Lys, and we're going to open the Fleur De Lys _ vector.crv3d file. Select that and press open, and these are the vectors that we're going to be working with. Now, because we're going to be building components from these vectors, it would be handy for me to see the 2D view and the 3D view at the same time. Now, because these vectors are portrait, we can simply go up to this icon here, which will arrange the views vertically, so we can see the 2D view and the 3D view simultaneously left and right, side by side. And before we get into the modelling, we need to check what our modelling resolution is currently set at the moment. So if we just go to this icon here, which is the Set Job Dimensions and Origin, which is under the File Operations, we can find that the modelling resolution is set at the bottom of this form here. Now you can see that currently it's set to Standard, which is the fastest method from the drop-down options, and this will give you 1 million points or 1 million pixels shared between the width and height of our modelling plane. Now for this example, I'm going to set this to high, which will render 3 times slower than the standard fastest setting, but it would also give us twice as many pixels to play with. So we're going to get a greater detail in anything that we create using the tools. So once we're happy with the resolution that we've chosen, simply press OK, and that will accept all those options for us. And now we're going to move to the modelling tab, which you'll find down the bottom here. So just simply click on that, and then here are our modelling tools and our component tree here. Now before we go ahead and create any shapes, it's always good to think about how we're going to construct our final composite model. So the way the component tree works is that we build it from the ground up. So we should start by thinking about what shapes we can create for our base, and then think about the Fleur De Lys as sitting on top of that base. And we're going to do that same thing in the component tree. So to start with, I'm going to change the level, the first level being level 1. I'm just going to rename that to base, like so. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to select our vector to create our base shape, and that's going to be this oval vector here, the most outer oval vector. Now for this we're going to be using the Create Shape tool, which you'll find at the top left of the modelling tools here. And this tool requires that we select a closed vector. So we do have a closed vector, and it won't work on any open vectors, and you will get an error message about that. So let's just select that with our vector selected, and you'll see that we have various options presented to us. Now the first option that we want to choose is the type of profile that we want to create. So we can have a rounded profile, or an angled profile, or a flat profile, like so. Now for this I want to create a nice shallow dome profile, so I'm just going to use this profile here, the curved profile. Once selected, we can go ahead and give that profile an angle. So we can go ahead and use the slider here. So we can create one that's at 54 degrees, as you can see here, or we can go all the way up to 90 degrees. We can even create negative shapes by just moving that below the 0, like so. The actual angle that I want to have is around about 20 degrees. So I'm just going to go ahead and type that in there. I can hit spacebar, which will make the software re-render that in the 3D view for us. So if I just move that here into the ISO view, you can see that we do have a very shallow dome, which is what we want for the actual base of this Fleur De Lys. Now all the other settings are fine. I don't want to limit the height, I don't want to give it a base height, and I do want the combine mode to be add. All I actually need to do now is simply give this a name. So I'm actually going to call this base. I'm going to apply that and then close. Now we can see that we have the new dome shape base in the 3D view, and we can also see that we have the grayscale in the 2D view. And now if we look in the component tree, we can see that we have that component that we just made in the Create Shape tool here underneath the level base. And we can see that currently that this component is set to add. Now if we just hover over the actual component, you'll see that we'll have a little dialog appear, and that actually tells us that the combine mode is set to add, and it also gives us the base Z value and the total height. Now from the component tree we can also turn off the visibility of a certain component by just checking and unchecking this little checkbox here, like so. And we could also do the same for the whole entire level. And that would mean any component underneath that level would also be turned invisible. So let's think about creating our next shape. Now the next shape that we're going to create is our border for our base. And we want to use this oval vector here as a drive rail. Now what we want to do is we want to extrude this shape here, which is our vector cross section. And we essentially want to extrude that all the way around our drive rail, like so. Now there's a special tool that we can use for this, and that's called the Extrude Tool. Now we will find this here, the third icon along from the left in the modeling tool section, and it does say to create a shape by extruding along one or more centerline vectors. So if we just click that, we can then enter the Extrude and Weave tool. Now the first thing we are actually going to want to do is to select our drive rail. Now at the moment you can see that we currently have our vector cross section selected. So if we just click anywhere in the white space, that will deselect all the current vectors that are selected. Now all we have to do is select our drive rail. So simply select the inner oval vector and then click the Use Selection button here, and you'll see that that now has been taken by the software as our drive rail, and you can tell that by the fact that it has now been highlighted in orange, like so. And once we've done that, the next option is simply to select the type of cross section that we want to use. Now we want to use a vector cross section. Now you can see that this option has already been selected here, so I'm just going to use that. If yours hasn't, just make sure that this button here is selected. And then all we have to do is simply go ahead and select the cross section that we want to use to extrude along our drive rail. So I'm just going to select this, like so. You'll see that the icon has changed on the mouse there. And all I have to do is simply press apply. Now as long as your settings here look like mine, so we don't have the weave under and over at crossings, and we don't have any scale to height, all we should have to do is simply click apply, and you'll see that that has now created our border for our base shape. So I'm just going to go ahead and simply just rename this to border, and then I'm going to click apply and then close. So I'm going to go ahead and give this a name, so I'm just going to call this border, like so, and I'm going to click apply and then close. And you can see now that the border component has been now added into our base layer on top of the component that we created called base. We can also even take a closer look at the component that we just extruded, and you can actually see that that actually does match the shape that we did select to extrude along our rail, like so. Now I'm just going to go put that view back in Z by clicking this icon here. And now what I'm going to do, now I have all the components that I need for my base shape, I can simply minimize these and turn off the visibility of the level base, as now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new level for my Fleur De Lys. So I can do this by hovering over the existing level, or any existing level, right clicking, insert new level, and you'll see that's now called level 1. So I can do the same again, so I can just right click and choose to rename that. So I'm just going to call that Fleur De Lys, like so. And much in the same way as layers work, you'll find that the levels in the component tree also will go bold, denoting that they are basically the active level. Now if I try to select the base level, you'll notice that that will glow red. Now that is the same way as in a layer that is not visible at the moment, so that will just tell you that your currently active level or layer is one that is not actually visible to us at the moment. So any components that I try to create would actually be created in a level that isn't visible. So let's just go ahead and select the Fleur De Lys level, so that is now the currently active level. And we can now go ahead and start creating some of the components for the Fleur De Lys. But before we do that, I just want to take a closer look at the vectors that do make up the Fleur De Lys itself. So if we just go and hover the mouse over the 2D view, I'm just going to zoom in here. Now I'm doing this by using the jog wheel on the mouse, and I'm just pushing that away from me, and that allows me to zoom in and out of the 2D view. Now what I'm looking at here is I'm looking at the overlap between the side vectors of the Fleur De Lys and the centerpiece here. Now this isn't a mistake actually, I've done this on purpose, as what I want to do is I want to create an overlap when I'm creating these individual components, so that when in the component tree, when I put them in the combine mode of merge, they create a seamless flow into one another. If I wasn't to do this and I created two lots of vectors that were flush against each other, then I am likely to have slight little gaps in between each of the two components, and that is going to cause problems when it comes to machining. Now if we zoom back out again, or we can hit F on the keyboard and that will then zoom to fit, so we can see all of our vectors. And we're going to start by creating the center shape. So simply select the center shape, and then what we're going to do is we're going to use the create shape tool. So if we go to the first option under the modeling tools, that's the create a shape from the vector outlines, select that, and we're going to use a curved profile shape, and we're going to use the angle of 60 degrees. Now all the rest of the options will stay the same, apart from that this time we're going to create the combine mode of the component to be merge, and we're going to do that for all the components on this level so that they all merge together as one. Once we've done that, simply give it a name. So I'm just going to call this middle, I'm going to click apply, and then we should see the shape that we have for the centerpiece of our Fleur De Lys in the 3D view, like so. So once I'm happy with that, simply click close, and you'll see that that now has been added to our Fleur De Lys level with the combine mode of merge, as you can see there. For our next shape, we're going to go ahead and create the sides of our Fleur De Lys. Now you'll notice that we only have the left hand side for vectors for the Fleur De Lys, but that's not a problem, because what we're going to do is we're going to create the one component being the left hand side, then we're going to mirror that component over to the right hand side using the transform objects tools. And that way we're only working with as much as we actually need to. So before we begin, I'd just like to take a closer look at the vectors that we're going to be using to create the side of our Fleur De Lys. So if we select them, you'll notice that they are actually two separate vectors. Now the reason for this is we are actually going to be modelling the side of our Fleur De Lys using the 2-rail suite, which is not a tool that we've actually used in this demonstration as of yet. So let's click on this icon to enter the 2-rail suite. And let's begin by selecting our 2 drive rails. So you can see that we have one selected already. I'm just going to hold shift on the keyboard whilst I select my second. So now you can see that they are both now selected. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to click this button here to use selection. Now much the same as the Extrude tool, we do require a vector cross section to use with this tool. But whereas the Extrude tool, the shape of the final component was actually limited to the shape of our vector cross section, that is not the case with the 2-rail sweep. The 2-rail sweep shape is actually predetermined by the actual width of the rails themselves. So if I select now our vector rail, which is going to be this, that is now going to be swept from the start nose here of each of the vectors and swept around in between these 2 rails like so. So if I go ahead and demonstrate that now by clicking apply, you can see now that that has now swept that profile around the 2 rails like so, as you can see in the 3D view. You can see if we look down the x-axis that the height of the component that we've just created is maintained throughout the whole of the actual sweeped component that we just created. If we want to scale the height of the component with the width of the drive rails, all we simply need to do is select this option here, which is to scale the cross sections with the width of the drive rails. Simply select that and then click apply, and you'll see now in 3D view that the height of that component is now determined by the width of the drive rails, and that allows us to get a much more organic flowing shape. Once happy with that, all we need to do is simply give it a name. So I'm just going to call this side. I'm going to set that component to merge, and I'm going to click apply and then close like so. And I'm just going to set the 3D view to go in the Z-axis like so. Because now what we're going to do is we're going to mirror our side of our Fleur De Lys. So let's select it. So you can select it in the 3D view, or you can select it in the 2D view, or you can even select it in the component tree here. Now once we have it selected, simply go up to the transform objects and select the mirror selected objects. Now we want to make sure we have flip about job center selected. We do want to create a mirrored copy, so make sure that is also checked. And then all we need to do then is simply select the flip horizontal button. And you'll notice that that has now created a copy on the opposite side for us. And that's all we need to do. So simply close the mirror form, and you'll see that that now has created another component in our component tree under the same level. And now all that's left to do to create our Fleur De Lys is to create the tie in the center. So as you can see, we have two vectors in the center. So we are going to be using the 2-rail sweep tool, which we just used to create the sides of our Fleur De Lys. So let's go back into the 2-rail sweep, like so. And let's start off by selecting our rails. So again, select one, hold the shift key down on the keyboard, and then select the second, and then select to use selection like so. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to zoom in a little bit in the 2D view so we can see more closely as what we're going to be doing next. So this time around we're actually going to be using two cross sections to create our component, and the reason for that will become clear in just a moment. The first cross section we're going to use is this one here. So if we select this one, and for this cross section I actually want to sweep this across the whole span. So all we need to do is simply attach it to the start node. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hover over the green icons here, which represent the start nodes for the drive rails, and simply click. And the software will then change those nodes to match the nodes here on our vector cross section. And we can go ahead and preview this, but before we do, just make sure we don't have scale cross sections with width selected, and then go ahead and then click apply. Now in the 3D view you'll see that has now created our shape. All we need to do is just change it to merge, like so. And you'll see that we do have a nice height on the outsides of our tie, but it doesn't quite make it through the center point of our Fleur De Lys. So what we can do is we can add a second cross section and attach that to the middle of our current drive rails, and then what will happen is it will go from the cross section here and it will smoothly transition into our second cross section wherever we place it within the drive rail. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my second cross section like so, and I'm actually going to attach it to the center point of the drive rails like so, and you'll see again that that matches the yellow node with the yellow node here. So now if I click apply, we should notice that there is a smooth transition between the starting and the middle points, and then the middle again to the end points of our components. If I just click apply, we should see that change. So if we just look down here, you can see that it does smoothly transition from the height of the first cross section into the middle where we've applied the second, and then it then goes back down again. So we have a nice, and we also have that nice dip shape which we did achieve from the dip in this cross section here. So all that's left to do now is just simply give that the name tie like so, click apply, and then we're just going to close that. Now if we take a closer look at the sides of our tie, you notice they're a bit square on each of the sides. So what we can do is we can actually use the Sculpting Tool within to actually give some smooth curve to this. So all we need to do is select our component. I've just double clicked on the component within the 3D view. And then what we can do is simply go over to the Sculpting Tool, which you'll find here on the Modeling tab. So just simply click that. You'll notice that all the other components have now turned invisible while we simply concentrate on smoothing and sculpting this component. So we can see we're automatically on the Smooth tool. There are various other tools in here, but I won't go into detail on those here. So now we're on Smooth, we can simply now change the parameters. So I want to have the diameter to around about 50, like so, and I want the strength to be around 10. So about here is fine, and you'll see that in the 3D view we now have a diameter of what the software replicates as 53 pixels. So all I need to do now is simply click and hold down the left mouse button, and that will then activate by glowing red, as you can see there. Now what I need to do is simply hold it down and just smooth it around like so, and that will then smooth that edge for us. Now we can go ahead and do the other side, but before we do that we just need to twiddle around, so we just select the twiddle option. We can then twiddle that component around like so. We can then go back into the smooth and then just do the same again to this side like so. And once we're happy with it, we can simply just press keep and then OK. So last thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to reset the views. So I'm just going to click the Z icon there, and I'm just going to click into the 2D view and press F to zoom to fit. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to discuss with you what the components and the levels that we've got our components on. So if I turn off the Fleur De Lys level and then turn back on our base level, so we can see that the base level is currently set to add, and you can see that there in the combine mode. Now this means it's going to be adding all the components within this level on top of the modeling plane, thus being this here. Then we went ahead and created another level on top of base called Fleur De Lys, which also has the combine mode of add, as you can see here. Now what this means, even though all the components within inside the level Fleur De Lys are all set to merge, the actual level itself is set to add. So what it's going to do is going to add all the components within the Fleur De Lys level on top of the level base. So if we switch on the visibility of the Fleur De Lys level, we can see exactly what's going on. So there we go. You can see that we now have our complete composite model, and that all the components on the Fleur De Lys level are being added on top of that level base, as you can see. Now there is one more final adjustment that I would like to make to this, and I can do this solely in the 3D view, so I can maximize this by clicking this button here. Now what I want to do is actually want to just stretch this component down a little. So all I need to do is double click to select it, and then select it once more to then put it into transform mode. And all I'm going to do is just use this node here. I'm just going to use that to drag our centerpiece down a little to around about here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move the other components down a little too. So all I need to do is double click to select them, hold shift on the keyboard, select the tie and then the right hand side, and then select once. And I don't have to hold shift once they're all selected to put it into transform mode. And then all I need to do is grab a hold of the components, hold Alt on the keyboard, and that'll then allow me to move this in line horizontally or vertically. I'm just going to move that down just a little bit, so to roughly around about here, and that looks perfect to me. And that then completes my Fleur De Lys. So I can click anywhere in the white space to deselect those components, and that then completes this tutorial. Now if you'd like to find any more information on the 2-rail sweep, the Extrude Tool, or the Create Shape tool, I have added links to the related videos section in the tutorial browser. And again, thanks for watching.